Welcome everyone to another webinar to get us ready for NACDA Convention 2024. I'm Kristi Dosh. I'm the founder of Business of College Sports, and I have been bringing you webinars leading up to convention to get you ready for all the great NIL content that we're going to have this year. And in fact, there was so much great content and so many amazing speakers we wanted to have that we needed to have this webinar series to get everything in. And I am so grateful today to be joined by these two gentlemen. Sully Fulp is joining us from LEARFIELD. He's the Executive Vice President of NIL Growth and Development. And then Shane Hinckley, who is the Chief Business Development Officer over at Texas A&M. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristi.
So nice to have you guys to chat with about this. I've had many conversations and written many stories about the work that Learfield has been doing during what I'll call the NIL era so far. And Shane, you and I have talked at length, and you even came and talked to my NIL class virtually at University of Florida to talk about what you guys are doing at Texas A&M. So I thought today we could kind of have that 10,000 foot look at how corporate sponsors are getting involved in NIL and how we can not only create more opportunities for the student athletes, but create more opportunities for existing and future sponsors as well. So I wanted to kind of hit you both with one question to start off. And Solly, I'll let you start with this one. How has the attitude of corporate partners really changed and evolved since NIL started in 2021?
Well, I'll start way back when I first started in the multimedia rights sponsorship business in college athletics. When I first started, we were leading with radio spots, and so that was the key premium asset that we were talking about with our partners. And then it was, website advertising on the official athletics website, TV visible signage. The past year and a half, especially, I would say it took a little time for the brands to warm up to this and the student athletes on their skills and capabilities with influencer marketing. The new lead now is student athlete influencer marketing and content creation. And brands are seeing the value of these student athletes and their storytelling and what they can bring in that deepening that connection with the brands into those respective university communities, and how it amplifies all the other sponsorship assets that we have. And last year, we had 177 corporate partnerships that incorporated NIL into their value proposition. This year, we're already over 500. So sponsors are definitely becoming much more comfortable in seeing the value of student athlete influencer marketing incorporated into their brand deals. And student athletes are becoming much better at creating brand value with their individual brands and making those connections and with the brand partners on influencer marketing activities. So we're seeing it both ways right now. The schools are being much more supportive and comfortable in engaging as well. So we're in the middle of that transaction in connecting with the student athlete influencer marketing rights school IP into the value proposition, and the activity's picking up. It feels like we started this before we jumped on this. By the day and the week, the activity's picking up quite a bit.
Solly, let me ask you a quick follow-up question. You talked about how you're seeing that growth in terms of the number of brands that are getting involved. Is it outside of the Power Five? Is it outside of Division One? What schools are really taking advantage of this right now?
We definitely are feeling it at the Power Five level, but I would say at all levels right now. And it's not just our revenue sports that we're seeing it with football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. And Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark, with her campaign with State Farm and Bose. We're seeing it with women's sports teams as well, and female student athletes. But we're seeing it across the board with all our sports right now. And so I would say it definitely started with our revenue sports in the Power Five, but we're seeing it with non-Power Five schools as well, the activity picking up.
Okay, great. Shane, you are at a Power Five. What does it look like at Texas A&M, kind of 10,000 foot view?
Well, I think 10,000 foot view is things have definitely changed, over the years, right? It used to be from no, and no, you cannot co-brand with us, to yes, how do we get to yes for the student athletes and these sponsors and these deals. So I think the foundation is completely flipped. And what's nice about working at Texas A&M, and I'm sure there's other schools that are doing this too, but is we have a very collaborative across silo approach. So I'm not actually in athletics, but I work very closely with athletics on a daily basis. And I work with Solly's team at Texas A&M, and we work to have a group that is evaluating every opportunity, every potential use. It focuses on education, not just to the student athletes, but education to companies, because there's still a lot of companies that feel that they don't understand how it works and they don't understand the opportunities that are there. And while we're seeing the growth that Solly talked about, we're still seeing a lot of there's a lot of gaps in the margins that can be filled, and we're trying to help both the student athletes and the companies take advantage of those gaps.
Shane, for those companies that still kind of don't get it yet, what does that look like? Is it just trying to have more conversations with them about it? How do you sort of convince them of that value proposition?
Well, yeah, sure. No, that's a great question. I think there's two ways, right? And Solly can speak a lot to the national level because you've got national brands that don't even incorporate NIL into their marketing plans because they don't have anybody that understands it. So unless you are someone who's been in the college space for a while, it's totally new territory. And so when you find opportunities to sit down, it really is a lot of one-on-ones. It's a lot of education. It's a lot of conversations. Hey, I've got this good opportunity and there's some assets you might be interested in. Let me introduce you to some people. But I think on the other side, at the local level is where you could probably create more unique and integrated brand approaches because it's a regional or a local audience that can relate to maybe some of the less obvious opportunities. For example, everybody is excited about men's football, men's basketball, women's basketball. Those are probably the top three. But when you get down and dirty and you're saying, well, I want to do a deal with an offensive lineman. What? Why would I ever want to do that? There's some great opportunities. Or I want to do something with 14 female athletes on the volleyball team, and I want to be women focused and talk to my women customer base. There's a lot that you can do at a local level that, we actually go out, and you asked, how do we educate? We go to Chamber of Commerce meetings. We'll tour the state. We'll have conversations with various businesses in partnership with our multimedia rights holder, Learfield in this case. So there's a lot of different ways. It's a surround and engage model.
And just to add to that, Shane, I think Learfield and multimedia rights holders have been experts in moving transactional media. You've got your print ads and your signage and experiential. We are now realizing the value of understanding our student athletes outside their sport and major and what their interests are and connecting those interests with the right brands. And, example that you just said with our national sales team, with Janiyah Barker, who's a Texas A&M women's basketball player, she did a really cool campaign with T-Mobile. And what was unlocked in that campaign was just her talking about her appreciation for the Texas A&M traditions and values and midnight yell experience that she had, and her group chats that she has with her team, and how long can she be without her phone. When you unlock that type of conversation and storytelling with the right brands, it really deepens the connection with the university community at College Station in ways that they haven't experienced yet.
Solly, how do you take advantage of that and sort of scale it? Because obviously we're talking about a large number of student athletes, and you've got ones that are just interested in hunting and fishing, or they're interested in fashion, or whatever it may be. It's impossible, I would think, at Learfield's level in your office to track all these individual student athletes. So what does that look like? Are you just relying on your folks that are on campus to sort of identify these athletes who have really well-defined, sort of hobbies and interests on their social? Or how do you find those people and match them up with the right brands?
Sure. We're getting better at it. And I think the awareness with our teams on the ground at the universities, definitely everyone NIL is part of everyone's job description now. And that includes our general managers and our sales and activation teams that we have embedded at 176 universities throughout the country. So the awareness on the student athletes that want to engage in NIL and what their interests are outside of their sport and major is something that we have to be aware of moving forward. And we're working on surveys at every one of our universities to capture that information, and we're getting better at it. But when we do make those connections, just like I was talking about Janiyah, we had our Michigan general manager reach out to me and talk about their case study that they just did with Sierra Brooks, who's a women's gymnastics student athlete who is in her senior year. We found out with the Michigan Dairy Association is doing a partnership that she drinks chocolate milk before every one of her meets. It's something that she does that's very important to her diet and her pre-meet routine. She's a perfect brand ambassador for that campaign. And we were able to make that connection. But it's something that we have to make sure we're getting very prescriptive as far as making those connections on what those student athletes' interests are.
Fantastic. Shane, I wanted to ask you, of the campaigns that you've seen come together so far, whether those are local or national brands, is there one or two that stick out in your mind as being particularly successful or fun and unique?
Well, yes. And, I'll throw some love towards another university that I really liked, because it doesn't have to always be about Texas A&M. The University of Nebraska did a great promotion with their offensive linemen and a local beef jerky company. And it was in the trenches, the hogs, all of the nicknames that that the offensive linemen get. And it was a really well branded and marketed campaign. And it shows the ability that, you probably couldn't, it would take a lot of effort for Solly's team to get a deal like that at scale, because it's so unique. And so how do you take a local company that has a certain budget level and help find the perfect audience and the student athlete that matches that? It's kind of like the chocolate milk, but this one was, okay, we've got 5 offensive linemen, and they had campaigns that showed all 5 of the big guys. And then they had the branded jerky and, what do we eat to stay lean, and it was a really good campaign. But that's the example that comes to mind, off the top of my head. There's been a few more. Obviously, the easy ones are the large influencers, right? There's a few female basketball players. There's a few female gymnasts that we know really well. There's always the top 2 or 3 performing athletes in each sport nationally. But I think the unique part, and what Solly said, I'll add on to this, is you really have to find ways to match. And so schools are starting to look at themselves as a concierge, right? You have somebody who is keeping kind of the thumb on the heartbeat of NIL at your campus with your student athletes. And they are then letting their team of people know, hey, I've got this opportunity. I've got this opportunity. Have you heard about this? And from a process standpoint, that's what we're really trying to focus on here at Texas A&M. And you may not have 5 or 6 great wins to start, but as we do that and it starts to come to fruition, we're going to have those wins on a regular basis going forward. We're still early, but the process, I think, is really important.
What about you, Solly? Any campaigns that stand out to you?
Well, pipeline jerky, Shane, that's a good call out at Nebraska. There's some different examples. I already called out the Sierra Brooks example with the Michigan Dairy Association, and we've got it's well known, our Zips car wash campaign that we did nationally, and also our Dunkin' Donuts campaign that we did nationally as well, and connecting student athletes in their everyday experiences and incorporating Dunkin' into that student athlete experience and how they created content was really cool. Wisconsin just did a awesome campaign with 8 student athletes in Exact Sciences, which is a biomedical company, non-traditional sponsorship category where they wanted to engage with student ambassadors in promoting their company within the community there. But what it also did with those 8 student athletes, it created additional awareness on what Exact Sciences did. And there were a number of student athletes that were like, it felt like a micro internship experience, right? I mean, these student athletes, as we know, are maxed out on their time related to their endeavors on scholastics and athletics. And rarely have they had pre-NIL had the opportunity to engage in different relationships and experiences outside of being a student athlete. And what I think NIL is providing now are these soft benefits of creating these opportunities for student athletes to engage in different relationships in different business categories and activate and show up for a video shoot and meet these different professionals and say, you know what, this is maybe a career that I want to engage in. And so I think, I keep telling our Learfield teams, that is something that we now have the opportunity, responsibility, and accountability to incorporate these human beings and these student athletes, 18 to 22-year-olds, into the deal-making process. When we make those connections, it should enhance their student athlete experience and in the deal-making process. And so there's, with these 500 examples that we have now, it could be a car dealer. Boise State just talked about how Lithia Ford was a little resistant to NIL because they saw the pay for play aspect of it, and they were a little resistant to engaging. But our general manager said, give this a shot. He engaged with 3 student athletes. They did a social media campaign. He provided them each a car as part of the exchange. And what it did is it also humanized the partnership. I mean, that car dealer now has a deeper connection with the Boise State student athletes that he never had before. And he's walked away, and now I think he's doing 5 student athletes in renewing his campaign. But I think it's providing these unique opportunities to make that connection both with the brands and the student athletes at a level we haven't experienced before.
I want to go back to what you said about the micro internships, because when I'm on campuses and I talk to student athletes, even before NIL, one of their biggest complaints would be that their classmates were all getting to intern, but that they didn't have the time to do that. And so I've worked with a few female student athletes now, and I just tend to work with more females than males, but I've worked with several now who have gone into some of their negotiations for NIL deals and asked to have a micro internship type experience, or to come and shadow somebody for a day, or to get FaceTime with the CEO of the company, particularly when they're working with companies where they might like to work, something that's already in their area of interest for that future career. And we had Marty Ludwig from Cincinnati on a previous webinar, and I'm going to botch the details, so I'm going to just give what I remember of the big picture, but I think they had several relationships where they were doing deals with some of their sponsors and incorporating their student athletes for NIL, but including those internship type opportunities. And I don't know how prevalent that is yet, but it's something I think student athletes really value, and they haven't all figured out that that can be part of NIL.
Well, if you think about it, the narrative pre-NIL for almost every university was come to our respective university, receive a meaningful degree at Texas A&M, win championships and character development. The fourth leg to the stool now is NIL and these micro internship deal making opportunities that can be unlocked with the student athlete experience. And what we're finding is that student athletes expect that to be part of their student athlete experience. So the schools are feeling the accountability to make sure that they're providing the proper support. And I think an extreme example of that is you're seeing it at University of Alabama with the creation of the Content Center, the Alabama Advantage Center that we worked with them on, to making sure the student athletes have that opportunity at the campus to create content.
Yeah. And I'll plug for sort of our companion webinar to go with this one. The other webinar that's kind of part of this topic, we've got Gary Verone from BYU, and then we've also got someone from NIL Real Estate, and they are through NIL working with student athletes to take the educational courses required to then sit for your real estate license, and potentially get that before you've even graduated from college. So I think another cool way that sort of student athlete's future career is playing into these NIL deals. Shane, have you guys had anything like that? Any examples there where student athletes have been able to sort of engage in something they might be doing after graduation?
Well, we do. I was listening to the internship conversation, and you depending on the sport, sometimes that's a summer internship, sometimes that's a off-season internship. But we've had some student athletes that have had some promotional deals where they're doing social media only, because let's be honest, the average amount of free time per student athlete is 7 hours per week. And in those 7 hours, they don't want to be fulfilling contract obligations. They want their free time. And so what they're trying to do is they're meeting their obligations, but then they're taking their off-season time and they're converting that into internships or job opportunities. And we've had one that we helped. She was a soccer athlete, and we helped find her some internship availabilities with some companies, because that was an area she wanted to go into, was kind of the social media side of marketing. And it worked out great.
I like that. Here's a question I didn't prep you guys for, so if you don't have an answer, that's okay. But I got to thinking about this. Is there anything you think fans would really respond to that brands haven't jumped in on yet?
That's a good
You're like, if
question.
I could just convince a brand to do this.
Solly kind of thinks about that, I've got a couple of answers for you, and Solly will have some good insight as well. But I really think I think there's an element of NIL that has soured the general public, and that's the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And fans don't like that a student athlete now has the freedom to come and go as they like. And so the sense of being able to have more longevity, and what sports kind of traditionally have that and aren't jumping around as much. If you can get a team that's a team NIL deal, and I'm thinking specifically on the women's side of the ledger here, I'm thinking volleyball, I'm thinking softball, I'm thinking soccer, even basketball. There is a female audience as purchasers and consumers. That demographic appreciates the brands that are focused on a team concept and not just an individual concept. And to be honest, those teams are so much more cost effective for brands to engage with than the single star quarterback or the single, Naismith player of the year in basketball. It's just a different conversation. And I really think that brands haven't quite unlocked that potential yet. And I'm excited to see what Solly's group and company can do to help take that. That's kind of version 3.0 in my mind. It's more savvy marketing.
Well, there's definitely a premium, I think, with the transfer portal on university IP rights. So I think as student athletes move and from university to university, the IP rights in campaigns are more valuable than ever, right? So that, Kristi, you're a Florida Gator. That's never going to change, and that's in your DNA. And so the association with NIL and IP rights will always make that connection. It's interesting, the two definitions, right? You got the pay for play aspect of NIL, which is in the headlines and I think is generally received negatively by the public. And then you've got the student athlete influencer marketing definition that's there. And we had an example where we were presenting to some Toyota dealers about NIL, and they wanted to get an understanding on these two different definitions. And one of the Toyota dealers said, look, we've had a couple student athletes come on our car lots and ask for a vehicle and that kind of pay for play exchange. And they were like, we're not interested in that piece of it. But if you can connect us with student athletes that can tell a story about how they grew up and their mom and dad shuttled them back and forth to practices in a Toyota, and it helped them in their journey to get to the playing field or to the court. If we can connect on that with those student athletes and in that content and that storytelling, we would love to incorporate that into our brand deal moving forward and in making those connections. And so I keep coming back to your question, Kristi. I think content is going to really be the future, and how these 18 to 22-year-olds can connect with the right brands and that storytelling they can bring to the table, I think is going to be awesome and better and better.
Let me add to that too. I think in Solly's business vertical, his company, I think the new evolution for his company is really going to shift from sales to content creation. Mm-hmm. And in the past, the sponsorships, the branding has really been about sales and activation. You have to have a content creation team to be able to deliver. And historically, university content creation teams are they're overworked and they're understaffed, and they're focused on the athletic team as a whole. So we're not, and in some cases, a lot of cases by state law, we're not even able to use our resources to facilitate help for the student athletes NIL deal. So the equalizer in this is companies like the one that Solly works for and others that can have content creation be part of that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've got a friend, Sam Green, who I think will be with us in Vegas talking about content creation. She's getting brought in by athletic departments to do workshops with student athletes to teach them how to create better content. And not only is that going to help them get better results for the brands that they're working with, but I've now seen multiple student athletes who have graduated in the last couple of years who, because they were doing NIL deals and they were constantly learning and upping their skills with content creation, ended up in a different job than they thought they were going to have. Right. Because they got so good at content creation that opened up new job possibilities for them after graduation. So I think that's one of those things where I also see there hasn't been a good, at most institutions, a good relationship built sort of between athletics and academics. Like I teach NIL at University of Florida, but most athletes can't take my classes because they have to be in the major or the minor. I teach in journalism and in sports management, so it opens up a few more possibilities. But a lot of the student athletes, they're over in finance or business and they can't even take my class. And so I think there haven't been enough resources provided around how to become a better content creator, but that's for another webinar probably.
and Kristi, what we're finding, like just an example with our Cheez-It campaign that we rolled out for those who stay at Michigan, that was a 3-month campaign that we rolled out, and it had like 14 million impressions. So the university communities want to consume this student athlete content as well. And so to your point, Shane, it is absolutely the future. We've got Learfield Studios. Cole saw this a couple years ago and was like, we have to have a dedicated content division that can respond to the future of where we're going. Yeah. And we can't make enough content right now. It's something that storytelling piece is absolutely requested by the brands, and the student athletes are getting really, really good at it.
Yeah. And the beauty of this is the old model was the university would put their hands up and say, no, you can't do that on our property. I'm sorry. Now the model is, hey, here's how we work with Solly's team. Here's how we work with the student athlete's agent. Here's how we work with the company. And here's access to what you need to create that content. It's just, we're not the ones producing it.
Right. Switching gears just a little bit, I wanted to ask both of you what this has looked like when we talk about adding collectives into the mix, because I know it differs from one campus to another, but some have been more involved than others in helping make some of these deals between brands that might already be sponsors with the athletic department or the university, and then with the athletes the collective is working with. Any thoughts on kind of where that's at right now or how that could be improved?
Shane, I'll take a jump at this, and then you can.
All right, that's great. Thank you.
So we have, I think, 85 collective partnerships, and we treat them just like a banking partner or an insurance partner, where they can purchase IP rights and marketing assets from us to promote their collective. We also, with the transactions that we do, we either direct the sponsors to Open Doors, who is our preferred marketplace at Learfield right now, or they can go to directly to the respective collective at that university and transact their marketing activity with the student athlete. So we have really good relationships with collectives, and our school partners expect us to work very productively and efficiently with our collectives. And to date, it's been going really well. But that's probably at a high level how we would define our collective relationships.
Let me ask you quick, Solly, because I have a lot of collectives that sort of follow me, and I used to do a lot of consulting with collectives, so I imagine some of them will end up watching this webinar. Do you have any advice for them about how they can take better advantage of this, or just how can they play a more integral role, or how can they help their student athletes achieve more success in this realm?
Well, I think working with us, the activation with these NIL student athlete influencer marketing rights takes a lot of work. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're seeing is collectives coming to us to making sure that we can assist them with the people power that's required to making sure that an 18-year-old feels comfortable showing up to a video shoot, that they're not missing class, that we're connecting the right brands with the right student athletes. And when you engage a collective, that activation and fulfillment takes a lot of work, and there's no way to do it other than having people power that is holding their hand and making sure that it's a positive and additive experience to what they're doing at the respective universities. So I think that's the biggest thing that we're seeing is making sure that we're arm in arm with the collectives on the fulfillment and activation of that NIL activity.
Makes sense. Shane, what about at Texas A&M?
Well, we have Texas Aggies United, and they're a proud sponsor with our Learfield partners and with Texas A&M, and they're a great collective to have working with us in this area. I will say this: all the collectives is a vertical that originally focused on boosters, and the real picture is a combination of what Solly's team does, multimedia rights, and boosters and the student athlete. So it's like a triangle. And the collectives are really in their infancy stages, and they don't have all the infrastructures in place. And Solly mentioned people power. They're usually very short on people power because they're operating on a margin of scale, but the margins are kind of thin for what they're doing. And so there's going to be some evolution, and there needs to be some evolution. And as a collective, if I hold certain athletes' rights, which is the common theme, is I'm signing mass athletes on campuses, and I'm signing them exclusively, they have to have a team that's going out and activating on those rights. Because just to sit and hold and wait for somebody to come to you is not a business strategy. It's a strategy of failure. And so we're going to see those schools and those multimedia rights partners that are integrated closely, working to maximize that relationship, rise to the top. And you're going to see those headlines continue in that space. But yeah, I think there's some growth in general in collectives as a whole nationally that they need to fill. And whether if they go and they find a partnership with a multimedia rights holder, or they do it internally and then bring that partnership together, either way will work. But they don't always, these are collectives run by fans and volunteers with maybe 1, 2, or 3 paid people on staff. And if you're talking, we have 620 something student athletes at Texas A&M, and trying to get, even if you just focus on one sport, let's say football, 85 scholarship athletes, 3 people cannot handle the individual needs of 85 scholarship athletes. And so people power is the key.
We'll be talking at convention about sort of the future of NIL. And I think for those of you who are going to be in Vegas with us, I think one of the topics we're going to broach there is what if collectives can come in-house? Does that solve some of the people problems? Does it really just mean you have to hire a bunch of new people? So stay tuned, folks. We're going to talk about that more in Vegas. But I think that does it for us today. Thank you, Shane and Solly, for diving in on some of these topics with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Kristi. It was fun. It was good to reconnect, Shane.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Good seeing you all, and thank you. We'll see you in Vegas.